Let's talk about religion. It's one of the most powerful and honestly most puzzling forces in all of human history. It can shape entire civilizations, inspire just incredible acts of kindness, and at the same time, fuel some of the most devastating conflicts we've ever seen. So, what is it really? In this explainer, we're going to dig into the very roots of what makes religion religion. To understand this, we have to look back. I mean, way back. The late sociologist Robert Bellah had this great line: "Nothing is ever lost." What he meant was, our past is always with us. The religious feelings and rituals we see today, they didn't just pop up out of nowhere. They are the latest chapter in a deep, deep evolutionary story that's been millions of years in the making. So here's our roadmap. We're going to journey from the evolutionary origins of belief in our most ancient ancestors, all the way up to the powerful social forces that shape faith today. We'll even tackle that tricky question: what's the line between a mainstream religion and a so-called cult? Okay, let's dive right into the central puzzle, the big contradiction at the heart of it all. Religion is this incredible force of opposites. It's responsible for some of humanity's most profound moments of peace and connection, for sure. But it's also been the engine for some of our most violent and divisive conflicts. And what's so fascinating is how it operates on these two totally different scales. On one hand, you've got personal faith. This is the stuff that offers comfort, gives life meaning, a quiet prayer, a shared meal, that feeling of connection. But on the other hand, you have religion as this massive social force, something that can unite millions for a cause or, mobilize them for a holy war. How can one thing be both? That's the puzzle we're trying to solve. So this brings us right to the core question of this whole investigation. If religion can be a source of deep personal comfort and a justification for huge conflicts, where in the world did it actually come from? To find out, we have to start not with scripture, but with biology, with our own brains. All right, let's travel way, way back in time. Because the raw materials for religion, things like awe, empathy, ritual, they aren't first found in ancient texts. They're found in the neuroanatomy of our ancestors, shaped over millions of years of evolution. So picture this. Our ancient ape ancestors were mostly solitary creatures, but as they moved from the forests to the open savannas, huge environmental pressures forced them to become more social just to survive. This wasn't a choice, it was a necessity. And that massive shift required a critical change in the brain. To live together, we had to feel together. We needed a much more complex emotional toolkit, especially in the parts of the brain that govern our feelings. So what exactly happened? Well, natural selection basically gave our emotional toolkit a major upgrade. We evolved beyond primary emotions like just fear or just happiness, and we started developing what are called second-order emotions. These are complex blends, like awe, which is kind of like a mix of fear and happiness. Or think about guilt, which can be a combination of sadness, fear, and even anger. These new, richer feelings were absolutely essential for creating the strong social bonds needed to survive. And get this shows that the roots of religious feeling might actually predate humanity itself. The amazing primatologist Jane Goodall observed chimpanzees doing what she called a waterfall dance. They'd perform this rhythmic, almost trance-like display when faced with a huge, powerful waterfall. She wondered if this could be a primal expression of awe, maybe a very early precursor to the spiritual feelings that we humans experience today. Okay, so we've got these biological building blocks in place, this capacity for complex emotions, for ritual, for empathy. But how do those raw materials get built up into the massive social structures that we call religion? Once religion shows up in human society, what's its job? Well, sociologists have two very different takes on this. On one side, you have the functionalist view. Thinkers like Emile Durkheim saw religion as essential social glue. It unites people under shared beliefs and values, creating a stable moral community. But then you have conflict theory, which comes more from Karl Marx. This view sees a much darker side. Here, religion is a tool used by the powerful to maintain control, the famous opiate of the masses that keeps people okay with being unequal. And that conflict perspective, it isn't just some abstract theory. I mean, history is just filled with brutal examples. During the First Crusade, Pope Urban II promised that any knight who went to reclaim the Holy Land would have their sins forgiven. This powerful religious conviction was then used to justify an incredibly violent siege and massacre in Jerusalem. It's a stark reminder of how faith can be a powerful, powerful motivator for large-scale conflict. Okay, so if religion is built on our biology and then shaped by society, how does it get passed on so effectively from one generation to the next? It's definitely not automatic. It's actually a really powerful process of socialization. Sociologist Harold Himmelfarb called this a channeling process. It all starts with the family. They lay the foundation with stories and rituals. But then, and this part is absolutely key, parents actively channel their kids into environments that will back up what they were taught at home. We're talking religious schools, youth groups, even certain friendships. All of this creates what sociologists call a plausibility structure. Basically, a social bubble where your beliefs don't just feel right, they feel like obvious common sense. Now, this whole process of creating a social bubble works for big established religions, but it also helps explain how brand new movements can form and grow. And that brings us to a really tricky and often controversial question. When does one of these new religious movements get slapped with the label of a feared cult? You know, the word cult is almost never used by people inside the group. They see themselves as believers or disciples or members of a new faith. That label, it's almost always applied from the outside, by worried families, by the media, or by other religious groups, often as a way to discredit the movement. So where's the actual line? Let's look at two case studies here. Both Mormonism and the People's Temple started with very charismatic leaders and were seen as pretty socially deviant by the mainstream culture of their time. But wow, their outcomes could not be more different. The absolute tragedy of Jonestown cemented it in the public mind as the quintessential cult. Meanwhile, Mormonism, which was once heavily persecuted and also labeled a cult, is now a major global religion. So what changed? What's the main difference? Well, you might be surprised. Often, the biggest factor that separates a cult from a religion is simply the passage of time. As one sociologist put it, the label often fades because it just takes time for a movement to establish itself as a legitimate part of the religious landscape. What was once seen as totally deviant can, over generations, become mainstream. Okay, we have covered a ton of ground, from our evolutionary brains to social structures to public perception. So let's try to pull all of these different threads together to get a clearer picture of what religion really is. So what is religion? Well, it turns out it's not one single thing. It's this complex, emergent human story. It's woven from the threads of our evolved biology, that capacity for awe and empathy. It's shaped by the pressures of living in a society, creating both unity and conflict. And it's passed down through that powerful channeling process. It's not something out there that we find, but something in here, built from the ground up, inside our brains and between our communities. And I love this quote from Charles Darwin. He was just noting that a simple physical sensation, like a splash of cold water to the face, could create a feeling that's similar to what we might call spiritual. It's a perfect illustration of how our most profound, most lofty experiences are tied right back to our physical, evolved bodies. These feelings aren't separate from our biology. They're a fundamental part of it. Which leaves us with a final, really big question to think about. Religion, in all its many, many forms, seems to be pretty good at fulfilling some of our deepest human needs. The need for meaning, the need for community, the need for a way to grapple with the huge mysteries of life and death. So, as long as we humans keep seeking out community and searching for meaning, will we always have something like religion?